the second episode of the Mononoke lecture logs of Chisenji sensei, titled Red Paper, Blue Paper, isn't just a continuation of the eerie post-war musings that captivated us in the first installment. It's a deeply layered examination of perception, urban legends, and the consequences of the stories we tell ourselves and others. It begins as many ghost stories do, in a seemingly mundane moment, but soon transforms into a labyrinth of psychological tension, social commentary, and folklore-fueled introspection. The episode tiptoes around the border of realism and the supernatural, never fully crossing over, yet leaving just enough ambiguity to make your spine tingle long after the screen fades to black. What's truly captivating about Red Paper, Blue Paper is how it weaves together seemingly disconnected elements. A missing student, a haunted school restroom, an age-old tale about cursed paper, and the lingering trauma of post-war society. All of this unfolds under the steady, dispassionate gaze of Chuzenji sensei, our unorthodox but unervingly insightful protagonist. At first glance, he's simply a teacher, stern, enigmatic, and mildly dismissive of the hysteria bubbling around him. But as the episode progresses, you can't help but realize Chisenji doesn't just solve mysteries. He dismantles them, piece by piece, exposing the deeply human truths hidden behind each so-called Mononoke. This episode centers on a chilling legend that will likely feel familiar to anyone who's ever stumbled down the rabbit hole of Japanese urban myths: the red paper and blue paper ghost. Traditionally, this spirit lurks in school bathrooms and asks the victim if they want red paper or blue paper. If you say red, you're flayed alive. If you say blue, your blood is drained. The brilliance of this episode is how it doesn't just regurgitate this trope for cheap thrills. It uses it as a cultural lens, a symbol of fear and suppressed guilt, especially in the context of a generation still reeling from the war's aftermath. It starts subtly. Murmurs of the school's 7 mysteries, uneasy conversations among students, the disappearance of Taguchi, a boy known more for skipping class than attracting paranormal attention. Kanna, ever curious and increasingly brave, steps into the role of investigator, not just for the sake of solving the mystery, but as someone seeking a foothold in a world that feels perpetually unstable. The missing student becomes the first thread she pulls on, leading her toward a tangled web of rumors, confessions, and emotional consequences. What I find remarkable is how the episode doesn't rely on spectacle. There are no jump scares or grotesque visuals. Instead, tension creeps in like a cold draft under a door. When Kanna and others begin to suspect supernatural forces behind Taguchi's disappearance, it's not because there are monsters in the shadows, but because the atmosphere, the unease in their voices, the sudden wind, the paper found where it shouldn't be, suggests the veil between the normal and the uncanny has grown thin. It's a quiet kind of horror, but it lingers, sticks to your skin like the humid Tokyo air. And then comes the unraveling. Chisenji, ever the scalpel-wielding surgeon of truth, peels away the layers of confusion with calm precision. He dismisses the idea that the red and blue papers are curses, at least in the supernatural sense. Instead, he ties the legend to Kaiden old ghost stories meant not just to frighten but to teach. In this case, the papers are symbols of panic, of fear, and most strikingly, of misinformation. His explanation reaches back into the cultural roots of the myth, describing how spirits like the Kainatida, a yokai that appears in the toilet on Setsuba night, may have mutated into school folklore. The idea that answering with red or blue can determine your fate resonates far beyond the restroom. It's a metaphor for the binary traps society imposes on us, especially in moments of fear. But even more fascinating is how Chisenji ties this to human behavior. He highlights how people fabricate ghost stories to explain uncomfortable truths. In this case, the curse of the bathroom might simply be a cover for embarrassment, for protecting someone from humiliation. A student disappears not due to a monster, but because of shame, because of misunderstandings, because of societal pressure. And suddenly, the red and blue paper becomes more than a spook tale. It's a coping mechanism, a narrative we invent to deal with what we can't, or won't, face. There's also a heartbreaking moment of revelation involving Shirai sensei, a faculty member who fabricated part of the narrative to protect a female student. The way Chisenji dissects this situation is both ruthless and compassionate. He doesn't scold Shirai for lying, he understands it, but he still insists on clarity. Because for him, truth is not just a goal, it's a moral imperative. He tells Kanna, if you cannot present the real truth, you must give them a convincing alternative, one that gives them peace. It's a chilling line, but also deeply humane. Chisenji understands that people need closure, even if it's constructed. Sometimes, illusion is a mercy. The climax of the episode comes not in a burst of violence or a dramatic confrontation, but in a quiet reckoning. Kanna, now armed with the full truth, or at least a version of it that will soothe the others, stands before her peers and tells them that the legend was nothing but a prank, that the red and blue paper were just colored slips jammed into a restroom door to create the illusion of a curse. The crowd nods and life moves on. But we, the viewers, are left with the deeper truth. It may have been a prank, but the fear was real. The anxiety, the shame, the social dynamics that birthed the legend, they're not going anywhere. This is where the show becomes brilliant. It doesn't promise that rationality can dispel all fears. It merely shows us how stories, true or false, shape our reality. Visually, this episode is a feast. The framing is deliberate, with lingering shots on hallway corners, flickering fluorescent lights, and the subtle choreography of wind rustling papers just out of reach. The use of red and blue is not overdone, but it pops just when it needs to on the paper, in the lighting, in the emotional shifts of the scene. The animation by Twin Engine is understated, but that works to the episode's advantage. Every frame feels lived in, real, like a memory you're not quite sure you had. At its core, red paper, blue paper is about storytelling. How we build myths around discomfort, how we pass down fear like heirlooms, and how sometimes the lies we tell are more compassionate than the truths we hide. It's a tale about belief, both blind and critical. It challenges us to question what we're told, but also to recognize that not all fabrications are malicious. Some are desperate, some are protective, and some are simply the best anyone could do in a complicated world. In the end, what Chisenji leaves us with isn't closure, it's clarity. And clarity, in a world brimming with superstition, is its own kind of exorcism.